Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism. It's lovely to have you back. Today we're going to be talking about your personal red flags. Yeah, some of these are personal to you. Before I get to that, just a gentle reminder, those of you interested in more of the deeper work on healing, please go to the video notes and hit that link and you'll get more information on that. And please, oh please, listen to my new podcast. It's a whole different perspective than this YouTube channel. You can get that information in the video notes as well, and you can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. So let's talk about these personal red flags, because we've all got them. Here's what I want to begin. I want to begin with, what do you consider to be the red flags in a narcissistic relationship? Just in general, drop them in the comments. It'll be interesting to see how much commonality, how universal they are, right? Reflect on your relationships, your narcissistic relationships. What were the ones you look back at and think, damn, that wasn't a red flag. That was a red neon sign being shoved in my face. Frankly, all of you could make a video on red flags at this point. You know them so well, right? Well, early on, they're always on their phone and they're chronically late and they talk about themselves exclusively and they interrupt you and they talk over you and you feel it in your body and they drive too fast and they compare you to other people. You know this territory. I've done videos on it. Everyone has done videos on it, right? But then the challenge with that is it makes red flags seem like a one-size-fits-all, doesn't it? It's not that simple. So let's talk about personal red flags. Red flags are a tough call sometimes. Obviously, if someone starts yelling at the bartender and then screams and demands the best table and then stares at their phone throughout your first date and then flirts with the server and then stares at other people in the restaurant inappropriately, yeah, those are red flags. I think we all got that. But so often these damn red flags are more subtle, and some are personal, meaning that they may not be red flags to other people, but they are for you. For folks, for example, who grew up in triangulated narcissistic families, meeting a new person who talks about other people a lot in a really mean and gossipy way may feel like a red flag, while others, they may find it mildly amusing, albeit vapid, right? For people who have been cheated on in the past, a person even sort of having a passing glimpse at an attractive person who walks by may be a red flag. For folks who haven't had that experience, it may not even register. For people who have been hurt in workplaces where there has been harassment and massive boundary violations, a boss or colleague that might talk, even jokingly, about seemingly intimate topics, even if it's not in a harassy way, but just feels like it's a little bit too familiar, that may be a red flag. For folks who haven't had this experience, they may just think like, this just seems like a real casual, chill work environment. For people who have had to deal with rage in past relationships, being with a person who gets sort of loudly frustrated and complaining about traffic, not even cursing, but they're really frustrated, may feel like a red flag. For people who haven't had to deal with this, it may just be a strong reaction to traffic. For a person who's experienced a lot of control in their past relationships, meeting a new person who's being really insistent and very precise about things, having to be a certain way, the restaurant you go, where you go next, having a sort of a really organized itinerary for a day, or being a stickler around time, that may raise red flags. For someone who hasn't had this experience, they may just think that this other person's really, really organized. The personal red flags are moments that get lit up on the basis of our experiences, our core wounds, and our core vulnerabilities. The tricky piece of personal red flags is that they may not be as compelling to someone else. So you may feel gaslighted. Oh, come on now. What do you complain about this new person? Everyone gets frustrated in traffic. Or someone might say, oh, you're making too big a deal out of someone just noticing someone when they walk by. It's normal. It's what dudes do, right? You, though, have your history. I have worked, for example, with many clients who have experienced infidelity. When they see a person being really sort of cagey about their phone or see that they're getting messages at all hours of the night, they have trouble with it. Other people say that the new person shouldn't be punished for the bad behavior of the past, but it's not that. It's a red flag for the person who has been hurt in a certain way in the past. The hardest thing in the world is for survivors to trust their instincts. Lots of folks feel foolish because they say I fell for the narcissist in the past. And survivors of narcissistic abuse are really good at internalizing the shame and the shameful behaviors of the narcissistic people who are in their lives. Let's face it, your great sin in these relationships was trusting someone who took advantage of that trust. Not a sin, right? But all of these histories, sensitizes us to behavior that reminds us of the hurt in the past. People who have been controlled in the past may have a more sensitive radar for controlling behavior. People who have been raged at may have a more sensitive radar for very loud, reactive anger and so forth, right? Everyone else has to realize that you've had an experience and come up with some damned empathy. Just because it isn't a red flag for them or for you doesn't mean it's not a red flag for someone else. And in this way, we also sometimes shame survivors, where we may have been really sensitized to a red flag. Well, couldn't you see her entitled behavior was a red flag? How could you have missed that? We run the risk when we do that of shaming someone who doesn't pick up on the personal red flags we see because it isn't their story. Yet, but when we do that, we double down on the shame the person already experienced in the relationship. And while everyone keeps shaming the survivors of these relationships, somehow the narcissistic folks keep getting away with stuff. Help me figure that one out, right? So I have talked about core wounds in the past, those early experiences we have, maybe being compared to other people a lot, or being criticized for appearance, or having overly strict and cold parents, or living with loud rage or neglect, or having observed the hurt caused by an unfaithful parent. These wounds build up a sensitivity in most people that means that those things become a little more red flaggy. Now, interestingly, for a small group of people, it goes the other way. And I did talk with someone who was in a toxic relationship. It was an interesting conversation, someone I knew. And she's in a relationship with a rager. And I told her my concerns. And she pushed back and said, I don't notice his rage. I had a rageful father. It's just sort of what I expect from men. This relationship is definitely not going to end well for her, right? But in most cases, we who have been through stuff, we're like cats or dogs, right? Our sense of smell becomes much more acute, and we pick up those kinds of red flags earlier. My cat notices things I don't. I don't gaslight her. Now, is there a risk we may blow up a potentially good relationship because of our more acutely focused personal red flags? It's possible, maybe. An empathic person, though, may hear your concerns, but that does require you communicating them, and they may understand. But if you don't say anything and just get up and go, obviously there's not going to be that opportunity. For most survivors, maybe having a high false positive rate isn't a bad thing, at least early on. As time goes on, and you are able to build up more empathic, mutual, and healthy relationships, your personal red flags may get a little less tightly calibrated. Personal red flags, in case you're thinking this, personal red flags are not your preferences. Like things like not liking a person who burps their beer, or chews a little loudly, or wears out of fashion clothing, or orders chicken fingers on a first date. Those are preferences. Those are not red flags, right? Red flags are things that unsettle us and make us wonder if this is a toxic or unhealthy relationship. Not just a, I can't be with someone who shops at a thrift store. Then I'm out of luck, but it's all right. That's not a red flag. Red flags are indicators of behavior that is antagonistic, uncomfortable, unsettling, and a sign that perhaps more bad behavior is coming. And you know what happens when you ignore red flags, right? love to have you share in the comments what your personal red flags are. But while we all know the classical ones, please honor your personal ones too and read the comments and see what other people's personal red flags are, especially if you're still working on healing. It may mean that we overcorrect, but after what you've been through, a little overcorrecting may not be a bad thing until you're feeling more solid and strong in yourself. Thanks again.